First, my guests are here this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by political commentator Emma Webb and former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone.
Hi.
Morning, both. Right, Emma, let's start with this story. You've heard us so far talking about it. You saw the clip of Liam Halligan talking to Suella Braverman, and it's these news stories, the front page of the papers today. This asylum plan to admit thousands without interview checks. What do you make of it?
I think this is completely idiotic. The idea is that they have prioritised the countries that normally people have successful applications from. So Afghanistan, Eritrea, Syria and Yemen. They're planning to do this to cut this backlog in asylum applications by basically skipping the interview part, so that they'll be able to submit their paperwork and then on the basis of that, rather than having a kind of oral in-person interview. But the reason why this, I think, is so idiotic is because all this is going to do is tell the people traffickers to say to the migrants, get rid of your IDs, claim that you're from one of these priority countries, then you won't have to have an interview. So they won't be able to tell whether you have, you can tell from someone's language and so on if you have experts in the room, which obviously they don't have involved in the process. That they would be able to tell whether people are actually from where they are claiming to be from. So this is just going to lead to loads of people claiming to be from Afghanistan, Eritrea, Syria or Yemen in order to try and skip the queue, and then we won't know who's coming into the country. It's a stupid idea.
Well, I think this whole thing is ridiculous. We have hundreds of thousands of British people who have been out of work, some of them virtually for the last decade. We should be training them, giving them skills, getting them into these jobs. We don't need to be importing people. We need to be giving a better chance for our own British citizens. I have never known a level of unemployment like this in my lifetime. It dwarfs anything. Under Labour and Tory governments all my life, they made sure people left school, got enough training, got a job. Now, I find it unbelievable.
So do you think we should be training more people to conduct these sort of interviews, get people in to be interviewing the asylum seekers, so that we're not just doing it as a rubber stamp, a digital exercise, send us your sheet. It'll be, they'll fill it in online, it will go through to the system. One person can do that.
We should be interviewing asylum seekers who are coming here because they face violence and potential death in their own country. I mean, it's nonsense to think people now just come here because they want a job. I mean, when we've got so many hundreds of thousands of unemployed people, we should be training our own people to fill all these vacancies.
What do you think, Emma? I mean, what Suella Braverman was saying there about the ECHR and Liam's pushing her on that, would you leave the European Convention of Human Rights in order to be able to enact the kind of immigration policy that we would like to do? And she said, and Liam said to her, does Rishi Sunak have the stomach for this? Do you have an answer to that question?
I think Braverman's response to that question was extremely diplomatic.
Wasn't it?
I think she has the stomach for it. I think she has the political will. I don't think necessarily that he does. Of course, he's talked tough on a lot of this stuff. I absolutely agree with Suella Braverman. I think we should leave the European Court of Human Rights. I think it's the only way that we will be able to really take control of our borders and our immigration system. Until we do that, we're not going to be able to achieve the full control that we need. I think Alp Mehmet from Migration Watch absolutely nailed it when he said that this idea for cutting the queue, cutting the waiting list down, is a dangerous folly, because this is not a solution to the problem. This is just cutting corners and letting people in without the appropriate checks. All it's going to do is encourage a situation that's already terrible. I think that if Braverman could, Braverman has the political will. If she could really achieve what she wants to achieve, I think we'll be in a much better position. But the problem is that you need the political leadership to come from the top. You need Rishi Sunak to be willing to take the political hit to say we have to leave the European Court of Human Rights is the only way to go.
Thank you to Keir Starmer talking in Manchester this morning, setting out what he's called his bold mission, his bold vision. Emma Webb, it didn't seem terribly bold to me. I wasn't sure whether he'd written it with ChatGPT, because it was basically a lot of sentences which said the same thing in multiple different ways. Fix the fundamentals, proud statement of intent, long-term plan.
Mission-driven government.
Mission-driven government. Did you take anything meaningful out of that?
Well, I mean, that was so much hot air. I don't know where to begin. There's so much that you can say about it. But I think the fact that many people will take heart from the fact that he's putting forward this ambitious plan. And I think to Keir Starmer's credit, he has actually pulled the Labour Party together quite significantly since the Corbyn period. But what he's saying there is so big, it's so ambitious, that actually I think it's quite worrying. I think we should be concerned with that kind of vision for government, because he's been talking there about modernising central government, about partnering with experts, fixing the fundamentals. It sounds as if he wants to try and create a very different type of government. And as you know very well, Bev, there are certain people who have ambitions towards types of government that are, frankly, in many ways, undemocratic. And I think that, we don't have the details that about what these missions are, because, as I say, this is so much hot air. And he is, it's very difficult to disagree with what he's saying. We all do agree that the Conservative Party have become quite closed in, that they haven't come up with the ideas and the leadership that we need. And yes, of course, Britain does need leadership and ambition, and to take Britain's future back, as he was saying. Yeah. It's very difficult to disagree with, but at the same time, he's providing none of the details, and I think it's the details that would be really quite worrying.
Yeah. Ken, what do you think? There's this new sort of trend now with politicians is everything has to be done in fives. So Rishi Sunak came out with his 5-point plan, if you remember. His was to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop boats. Let's just compare that with Keir Starmer's today. Secure the highest sustained growth in the G7, make Britain a clean energy superpower, build an NHS fit for the future, whatever that means, make Britain's streets safe, great, and break down the barriers to opportunity at every stage. There are points of difference, but they are brushstrokes.
Yes, but I agree with everything he's just said. I mean, the NHS is in the worst crisis of my lifetime. We have hundreds of thousands of job vacancies. People are waiting. I've got to wait a year for my knee surgery. This is ridiculous. Nothing like that in the past. We have had the worst government in this last 13 years of my lifetime. And what Keir Starmer recognises if you want our economy to grow, we've got to increase investment, public and private. We've got to create new good jobs. We have fallen behind. We're the only one of the major economies that is smaller than it was a decade ago. We are the worst government of my lifetime, and the worst amongst the Western democracies. Keir Starmer is clearly focused. He didn't come into politics to be a celebrity like Boris Johnson. He came in to run things. He spent his career prosecuting murderers and rapists. He knows how to run a department. And I think he will be our best Prime Minister since Clement Attlee's post-war Labour government. He'll create a better world for my kids and tackle the most important factor, climate change. If we don't tackle climate change, we could face extinction by the middle of this century.
Emma Webb, are we going to face extinction by the middle of the century? And should that be a key? Is it a vote winner, that particular attitude? I don't think so. Make Britain a clean energy superpower. That is one of Keir Starmer's 5 points.
Of all of the things that Keir Starmer seems to think are priorities, I think up in the Red Wall, that's going to be the least of people's concerns, not least because all of this striving after net zero and all the green levies are actually partially responsible for the cost of energy, which is adding to the cost of, and fueling, pardon the pun, the cost of living crisis. I do think that the Conservative Party should be worried about the direction of travel with the Labour Party. Obviously, they're 20 points ahead in the polls. Yeah. Keir Starmer is actually making a very good show of it if you just think, PMQs over the last couple of weeks. I think the Conservative Party should be really worried about it, but partly because there are some really concerning things buried in amongst all of these platitudes that Keir Starmer has been spouting, including here in this story from what he has been saying about these 5 national missions. There's a quote from him saying that he hopes that they can shape markets rather than serving them. So this is what he's proposing here, I think, is a much more interventionist, controlling form of government. When he talks about fixing the fundamentals, he's talking about giving the government more control. What we need actually is limited government, less control over people's lives. We need government to do the job of government rather than doing all of these other things that are not the job of government. I think that what we would find is that yes, the Conservative Party are bad. If you vote for the Labour Party, what you're going to get, I think, is probably something that you wouldn't really be bargaining for.
Ken Livingstone, what do you make of that? We need a smaller government. We need a smaller state. It just seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And Tony Blair absolutely packed the civil service with the people that he wanted in there.
And that's, if you want a world that's going to get better and give our kids the chance of a decent life, you need a bigger government. We've had, more cuts in this last 13 years than at any point in my lifetime. That hasn't created a good, strong economy. We've slipped behind all our major competitors.
But that's whilst the government has got bigger, while the state has got bigger. I want a smaller government.
Yeah.
I don't want to know the government is even there most of the time. Look, I want my services to run effectively. I want them to take as little tax as they possibly can.
Because, I was born in 1945 when that post-war Labour government massively increased the size of government, created a welfare state, health care, got everyone a job. You need a government that intervenes. If you're seeing a government that shrinks, the economy's going to shrink, more people will be permanently out of work. This last 13 years has been the most incompetent government of my lifetime. We need to get back to what Keir Starmer was saying, because he understands the truth. He didn't come into politics to be a celebrity like Boris Johnson. He wants to be on top of the issues and make sure he creates a better world for all of us.
OK, all right, well, we've got a lot of time to debate that. Well, when's the next election? End of next year. Back with me, I'm delighted to be joined this morning by political commentator Emma Webb and former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone. So, Emma, Shamima Begum lost her appeal to regain UK citizenship. Was that yesterday? Was it the day before? I've lost track of time this week, doing 2 shows a day. I think it was the day before yesterday. And, of course, there are lots of comment pieces in the papers today. The teacher who was seriously injured in the 2017 suicide bomb attack on the Manchester Arena. Of course, that claimed 22 lives. She says today Shamima Begum should never be allowed back to the UK. You agree?
I completely agree, and I think that this is extremely powerful. This victim of this arena bombing, saying that the girls who went to the Manchester gig in 2017 never came home. So why should Shamima Begum? I think that absolutely hits the nail on the head, because one of the really frustrating aspects of this entire debate around Begum returning is this constant appeal to sympathy, as if she's the victim. The Times didn't decide to put a Yazidi victim of sex trafficking on the front of the magazine. Begum went to go and build a state that was genocidal, that trafficked women, that had slave markets for Yazidi women, Shia Muslims, for Christians. They have committed some of the worst atrocities in the 21st century. The idea that this girl is the victim and we should feel sympathy for her is sick.
Well, and a young woman now. I mean, we have to remember she's 23. She's no longer a girl.
Exactly, she's no child. And I think that this is a really, really powerful comment from this victim of the Manchester Arena bombing, because if you remember, Begum actually said when she was first interviewed, when they first found her in the camp, that she said that she thought the coalition airstrikes in Syria were tit for tat. She said that she hadn't heard of the Manchester Arena bombing, I think, but she clearly was very much, still at that point, very much beholden to ISIS ideology, and waited till the very, very final hour to leave the project of building Islamic State. So I think that we should feel no sympathy for this woman. I think that she should not be allowed back. I think it was absolutely the right decision to strip her of her citizenship. And I think that the British public have absolutely no obligation to feel sorry for her at all.
What would you like to see happen to her then?
I think that she should stay where she is.
In the camp forever?
I think it's not our problem what happens to her. She made her bed, and now she has to lie in it.
Ken Livingstone,
well, look,
is it our problem?
She was born and brought up in London. She's a British citizen. If she's committed a crime, she'll be in a prison here in Britain, not on some horrible little camp in the Middle East, which is not, being bound by the sort of laws that apply to our prison. So, if she is guilty of this, keep her in prison, but here, not send a British citizen to somewhere in the Middle East where they'll be subject to all sorts of abuse and most probably being raped regularly.
It would be very difficult to build a case that would see her put behind bars if she came back.
Well, if we can't prove that, why are we keeping her out? If she's found guilty of a crime that has led to the death of people, she should be in prison, most probably for the rest of her life. But if we can't prove that, why are we dealing like that?
Well, Emma? So this is actually a really big problem, that with returning fighters, it's very difficult to secure a prosecution because a conviction, because it's difficult to collect evidence in a war zone, particularly for women in Islamic State. Obviously, this war took place quite some time ago now. Very difficult to collect evidence of crimes committed. But that doesn't mean that the Home Secretary doesn't have evidence before him that can inform. And he has the power to do this. He has the power to strip people of their citizenship if they have dual citizenships. Now, she has claim to Bangladeshi citizenship. She's entitled to it. So that means we haven't actually left her stateless, even if Bangladesh don't want her. Understandable that Bangladesh don't want her.
Well, Bangladesh have said, we'll take her back and she'll be tried and she'll be executed.
So the point is, she won't face justice here. She will be having to be constantly,
very quickly, because we do have to move on. But what do you think she would do if she got back?
I think that she would become a celebrity here. I think that's the way that the narrative is being currently spun. She'd probably come back, make an awful lot of money as some kind of celebrity figure. But she also has this potential to be. She's a symbol. The security services have already said they're seeing people now going back to former war zones, places like Syria. She could become a flashpoint and a symbol for other extremists. So bringing her back here in many ways, I think, would be absolutely the opposite of justice.
Ken, let me bring this to you. Big story in the Daily Telegraph today. Labour and the Lib Dems in a bid to block a bill to scrap EU laws. What do you make of it?
Absolutely right, because those EU laws set standards for working conditions, pay levels. I mean, they have defended the lifestyle of ordinary people here in this country. If those are scrapped, then a lot of companies will start cutting the wages of their staff, making life all sorts of conditions worse. Those laws have improved the quality of our life. We should keep them, even if we've left the EU.
But do you not have faith that our government could create those sorts of laws? If Keir Starmer gets in at the next election, which you may be confident that he will do so, they would be safe in his hands, wouldn't they? Employment laws?
Yes, under Keir Starmer they would. But not under this government, which is the worst of my lifetime and the most dishonest of my lifetime.
OK, Emma Webb?
I think it's anti-democratic. If the people vote to change certain laws, then those laws ought to be changed. And if the people vote, and I very much doubt that people are going to vote in a government that are going to take away employment protections and things like that. I think that this is it's a much more important issue than the amount of attention that it's actually got. I think that Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives are right that we should be scrapping EU legislation and we should be making out, because remember, a lot of this EU legislation is not bespoke to any particular country. This is just a one-size-fits-all. Leaving the European Union was supposed to entail taking back control and having sovereignty and making our own decisions and really, in political terms, as a nation, growing up and making decisions for ourselves. So, of course, we should decide which laws we want to keep, drop the rest of them. If we debate every single one of these 4,000 laws in Parliament, we're going to be going forever.
So you don't need to. Just keep them as they are.
Why
do you think they're wrong?
Is it?
They're defending the quality of our life. They're protecting our environment. Take these away, our life will be worse.